Thank you for coming early. This is a weekly Soul Talks program. Happens every Saturday. It's meant to be an interactive discussion-based group. And we have different topics each Saturday, different speakers. The whole idea is community building along with spiritual enlightenment. It's like we all grow together. So every Saturday, it's 11. And usually people trickle in as the program starts. We start with 2 minutes of mantra meditation, musical kirtan, musical meditation. And after that, our discussion starts. And after that, we have a short mantra meditation again, musical kirtan, musical meditation, and then we have a dinner, a lunch preparation. So, yeah, we can start with our mantra meditation.
So the mantra that we sing is on the card. That's white and blue. Oh yeah, it's on the TV too, right behind me. And so this is a type of like meditation we do. Called kirtan.
It's a call and response type of meditation. So the singer sings in the ear, and we get an opportunity to sing along. So feel free to sing to full heart, don't be shy. Might seem awkward, especially if you're not used to singing. But the whole idea of meditation is when you're singing, your tongue, your senses are engaged, your mind is absorbed in chanting the mantra. So the process of mantra meditation removes our stress, anxiety, calms us down. So the literal meaning of mantra is that which delivers the mind. And the mantra, this Hare Krishna mantra has 3 distinct words, Hare, Krishna, and Rama. That specific combination of this mantra makes it really powerful. It's a transcendental mantra. So just by singing, even if you don't fully understand what it means, basically it's a call to harmonize ourselves with the universe of divine energy. So we're calling out to the divine and harmonizes our whole existence. So even if you don't fully grasp the significance, it's still powerful. It's just like a medicine, whether you know or not the potency of the medicine you consume it, your ailments get cured. So this mantra meditation is really powerful.
Someone's never had mango before. Distaste it immediately. So there's this mantra you can just, even if you don't know, experience right away. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare So that's how I start. And then I'm getting confused because I usually always start with that one, and I switch. Sorry. I'll get it.
I don't know the difference.
They're different, sometimes different melodies to different mantras and stuff. Oh, Hare Krishna. That's not Hare Krishna. That's not. Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Want to sing it? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else here for the first time? What's your name? Zion. Zion, nice to meet you. Welcome, welcome. So we have our wonderful guest speaker today, Godruma. All of his talks are very deep, thoughtful, insightful. So feel free to dig into his brain, into his heart, into his consciousness. We do this every Saturday. We have this pure time music meditation, followed by a talk, discussion, and a lunch. And it's your first time here?
No, actually, still working.
Oh, you still work? What's your name?
Barbara
Barbara. Oh, Barbara, what's your last name?
Sanchez.
Barbara
This is every
Sanchez.
semester, yeah.
Nice, nice. Welcome back. And you live here in New York?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. And we got Asha.
Well, so welcome again. Maybe you just do a quick round of intro, like is your name? If this is your first time, and how did you hear about this event? Start up here.
Hi, I'm Leon. Nice to meet y'all. It's my first time experience. I always come here with a fresh mind.
So he comes every Saturday, but then it feels as if it's his first time because he's fresh in spirit.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Julie. This is also my first time. One participant in white.
Julie, you said?
Julie.
Julie.
Short.
So, and, Barbara, you said?
I think Barbara, where she is served as a program manager, and I'm traveling working with.
So you've been coming for the past few weeks, you said? So,
My name is Zion Peru. The universe just will be here. I just went on Eat Right and I typed in, yoga, tai chi and stuff, and this had popped up. But I listened to some guy named Moji for like a couple of years now, and I guess because I've been listening to his videos, I want to just like dive deep into like not Buddha, but like, because it's not like a religion, but like, just the way of I guess the universe just kind of just brought me here, so I'm here. That's, I'm just here.
yeah, that's how the universe works. It works to evolve our consciousness and puts us in specific places that we're meant to experience.
Yes,
Thank you. Zion, right?
yes, sir.
To the optional program, so I can hear.
How do you spell your name?
ASH.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful name.
I'm Owen. As we said, and the universe brought me here because we were invited me last night.
But I'm not the universe.
You are. Oh,
So today's topic is fear, or more specifically, unearthing fear, exploring the dark side of human psyche. So just to give you a quick summary of what we'll discuss, I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there on fear and conquering fear and things like that. Fear is a big, big topic. So just let me make sure that I turn my sign. Sorry. Yeah. So fear is like a big, big topic. There's so many things that are part of that big topic. We'll take a slice of that topic and also look at fear from a spiritual angle, from a spiritual perspective. So this is yoga and bhakti community. We meet every Saturday and sort of try to inspire each other and try to keeping spiritual life in the center. So that's our focus. And please pardon our appearance. We have some renovation going on, some painting. So yeah. So we'll talk about fear, and like I said, fear is like a big, big topic, and such a complex emotion that's hard to understand, and it's hard to analyze or even rationalize. It takes a while for us to even accept that we have fear of something, but even after that, it's hard for us to understand what is it about fear that's so daunting. So fear itself is not a bad thing. So just to right off the bat, when we say that we're not here to sort of say fear is bad, we gotta conquer fear. Fear of a bad thing is good. But the whole problem is when fear takes over and paralyzes us. That's the issue. So fear itself is not bad, but losing control of our emotions and when fear takes over and paralyzes us, and that's where the problem is. I'm sure all of you have had that experience, whether it's a stage fright or standing up to a bully or whatever that is. When fear takes over, it's hard for us to function. Even the basic things like speaking becomes really intimidating. So yeah, fear itself is not a bad thing, but how it takes over. And fear, like you've noticed, like a survival mechanism. When our body and minds perceive a threat, then our body reacts a certain way, and that reaction is fear, and protects us, stimulates us, prepares us to take action to protect ourselves in defense. So fear has its own functioning, and fear works a certain way. And scientists psychologists have for long analyzed how fear works. And it starts with the mind, and the mind reacts a certain way. And scientists say our brains release cortisol and adrenaline, and our body accordingly aligns and reacts. And soon enough, fear sort of takes over our whole body. It just has a gripping and paralyzing effect. I'm sure you guys must have had that experience in your own lives, where fear just takes over your whole body, and you can feel it in your body. You can feel that fear of your heart beating faster, your pupils getting dilated, your blood pressure, and whatever reactions your body, perspiration, tenseness. And so fear soon takes over our whole body, and it's in preparation for the flight versus fight mode. I'm sure you've heard of that, the fight or the flight mode. Like even in animals, they have this instinct whether to sort of fight back or to sort of fly, meaning run away. And for us, it might not be so dramatic, but for us, flight mode meaning we might be in denial of what gives us fear. And fight mode meaning to be defensive about unimportant things, or combative, defensive out of this instinct of fear, which makes us sort of have this need to sort of protect ourselves. And of course, there's a third way our body reacts. There's a fight mode, there's a flight mode. There's also the freeze mode, where our body just freezes and we just get paralyzed and not sure how to act in certain instances. It's going to be fight, flight, or freeze mode. And of course, psychologists and scientists, they say that they categorize fears into different categories. They say natural fears and acquired fears. And natural fear is something like fear of a lion or something like that. It's natural. It's not an artificial thing, or you're confronted with something like a head-on collision or anything. It's a natural fear. It's understandable. And even in natural fear, it's interesting that it differs from people to people. There's some fears which is common, fear of death and things like that, and there's some fear which differs from people to people. Some people might be afraid of mice, they're not afraid of spiders, or vice versa. Some people might be afraid of intense fear of sort of losing money and whatever that is, natural fears. And then there's acquired fears, which is we haven't always lived with it. At some point, we learned, quote unquote, learn to have that fear, learn to fear that way. Any experiences of acquired fear that you didn't always have? I see sometimes not. This is, by the way, an interactive session. It's not so much as a monologue. Feel free to jump in with any comments, realizations. Would you like to share, Barbara?
Yeah, I think but it does take work. There are moments where like we're, freeze, and then there's moments where I can feel fear and do the thing anyway. But it's not constant. It's a battle. It's difficult, but having the awareness of it has been like so that you shared.
Wonderful, thank you. So unlearning and unpacking, right? I love the words you chose. You have to unlearn whatever you've learned. And apparently in the UK, around 2015, 2016, there was a lot of crime with people dressed as clowns. And they would go around, and people started having fear of clowns. And that's one classic example of acquired fear. I think it's pleurophobia, or I forget, it's a complicated name, fear of clowns. So anytime someone sees someone walking on the street dressed like a clown, it's like a little creepy. Or someone just startles you with a clown-like costume or attire, it's kind of like a little creepy. So that's an example of acquired fear. And like I said, some of this is we've learned this over time. It's not always, we haven't always learned. But the fascinating thing is humans have a fascination with fear, like some strange kind of attraction and fascination for fear. Like we would go to horror movies and roller coaster rides and haunted theme parks, and there's some kind of a kick that people get out of being confronted with such situations. Not everybody, but it's still there. People love. I mean, how many here like horror movies? Anybody big horror movie fan? So what is it about horror movies that you like?
I'm not sure. I just grew up with them. My mother, when I was a child, my mother used to always watch horror movies with us. Like, she used to sleep in the bed, me and my brothers used to have like a pile on the floor. We always used to watch like Freddy and Jason and Chucky and stuff. So I guess I just grew up liking horror movies, you know, but I don't tend to like attach myself to like big emotion. Sometimes you get scared and sometimes. Well, nowadays the movies is pretty cool. Back in the days, I guess it's scary.
Yeah, so you said you just grew up with that, and
Yeah.
so it's this still there's a strange fascination humans have with fear. And of course, many psychologists again have analyzed this, and they say that it prepares us mentally, stimulates us, and prepares us for it's like a rehearsal, mental rehearsal to cope up with possible dangers. And sometimes they say it's not so much as the fear that people enjoy, it's the feeling of relief that follows. You might either realize, okay, it's just a movie, relax, or
Exactly.
step out of the movie theater, you get this. So some say it's like the feeling of relief that comes after, or like we're discussing, your brain releases these hormones and substances like cortisol and adrenaline. So it's that rush that people enjoy, not so much as like people like being scared, but it's that rush. So there's different, no matter how you look at it, it's like a strange relationship we have. You know, sometimes people like to explore the dark side of human psyche. You know, so we have a different relationship, fascinating relationship with fear, and but it's not fun when it happens in real life, right? It's one thing to sort of go to haunted theme parks, but in real life, being confronted with any real life situation, it's not fun. It's no more like just a movie or some simulated experience. So, by the way, did anybody have any such experience of late? Like in real life, you're really scared to death,
Oh, not scared.
or any kind of fear, even if it's
Well, I
not.
was a little, I had a little fear coming here because sometimes, it's not like I guess I fear different things that I don't know about because it's new for me. So sometimes I guess I feel like the unknown,
Excellent.
but it wasn't a fear, it was just like anxiety.
So despite your fear, you're here.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So you're trying to sort of overcome that fear.
I was in a storage unit service elevator and we were going down the elevator and it stopped and sparks came down on us. And I was more afraid I would have to bring everything in the elevator down the stairs. So I was like, go, go, go. Let's get down.
Yes.
I'm here.
Interesting you mentioned elevator. This morning, my day, that elevator coming up. And we took to the third floor and took quite some time for it actually got there.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, please don't let me get stuck in this elevator because how would I be able to call up for help or whatever? So just throw that out.
Julia, right? We came here earlier before you guys came. I was just joking with her. She was all by herself, and she was like, "I don't know, am I the only person?" And I was joking that this was a training for you to see how you react in fear, because this topic is fear. So in fact, I had a recent experience. We were on a road trip, like maybe a month ago. A few friends. We were to West Virginia. There's a nice farm community nearby in the woods, in the forest. There's this abandoned house. It's almost like a haunted house. It's not exactly a haunted house, but people have been there. It's like they've had spooky experiences. It's like really, it's like abandoned, completely dilapidated, abandoned house. So we decided to sort of explore. So you have to park your car sort of a mile away from that, maybe like a few hundred yards away from that house, and there's no way to get there. There's like it almost feels like a hiking trail, but it's covered over by like creepers and vines, and you have to clear your way through the bushes and trees, and it's hard to get to that house, that abandoned house. And once you get there, it's so spooky. The first time I went there by myself, all alone. And there's like a door, it's like to the entrance, like a main entrance, and it's like half broken, and you have to sort of enter. And the living room was a little dark, and I was about to enter, and I saw that a part of the ground floor was sort of caved in. It was like a whole big hole, and I was I was thinking, what if I didn't notice and I fell down? And in that part of the wood, you don't get cell phone reception. You can yell and scream all you want for help. If you're sort of stranded or you're trapped, that's it, just wish for the best. But still part of me wanted to sort of explore. And then I came back again, like a month ago, few of us, we went inside. It was such a rush. And it's interesting why such experiences really stimulate us. So that was one real life situation that it was kind of fun, especially when you're with a group of friends. Then you would try to explore different rooms, and certain rooms were a little spooky. It had this mosaic, stained glass walls, and really far out structure, and completely abandoned. So it's interesting. What is it about fear that makes it so fearful? What causes fear? What stimulates fear? What any thoughts on that? I know you mentioned that it's like the fear of unknown, right? That's one of the things. It's like that's one of the most common reasons why people feel fear. It's like the fear of the unknown. Like imagine you're driving at night in a completely desolate street. There's no lights, there's no life form around, it's just you by yourself in the car. Has like a strange, not that there's some perceivable object of threat, but it's still that fear of unknown. There's this famous, question. Excellent. That was actually going to be my next point. Excellent. So the fear of unknown, especially, has so many dimensions, one of which you just mentioned. And it's not necessarily this perceivable object, but not knowing gives us a lot of fear. There's this famous novelist, Stephen King. Most of his books, there have been movies made out of his books. It's like a scary, his novels, books are all based on fear. And it's not so much as ghosts or there's a ghost and you're running away from it. His theme is all about unknown. That's how he evokes fear, the fear of unknown. And that's really strange and scary for all of us that we fear, because humans are, they crave structure and certainty, So man is a creature of structure, and it gives us some kind of a comfort and solace to know that there's some kind of a structure, like certainty. And uncertainty gives us a lot of anxiety. When you're not certain, you're not sure, it just gives us a lot of fear and anxiety. But that's not the only reason, just because things are unknown. There's other reasons why we also get fear. Like, for example, you might know something and still be scared of it. Like, you might be scared of maybe snakes or mice. You might see it, so it's not as unknown. You still see it. And so it's not just the unknown. Yes, the unknown is one aspect which gives us fear. Like the other day, I was coming back home in the subway. I was waiting for the train, and there was a rat on the platform, not on the tracks, but on the platform. And it was just sort of crawling, and not many noticed. And I noticed, and I was just watching to see how people are going to react. And I had this like devilish smile of like, okay, what's going to happen, just anticipating. And then other guy also noticed. He was standing at a distance, both of us were seeing how are people going to react. And there was this lady, she was probably heading to some nightclub. She was dressed in a dressy attire, high heels, and she didn't notice. And the rat came straight towards her, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, should I warn her?" And it would be weird if just walk up to some lady and say, "Oh," so I just decided to stand and watch because I didn't know what else to do. And then the rat just crawled on over her legs, and before she could react, she sort of just brushed, and before she reacted, the rat was gone. And her expression was priceless. She noticed it was a rat. She was like, should I be scared? But it's done, it's over. Should I be alarmed? She had this confused look, not knowing which emotion should I pick. And few of us were I was trying so hard not to snicker. I was like, oh my God. So in that case, the fear, it's not the fear of unknown. Maybe the unknown protected her from fear. Had she known, she would have been more fearful. So it's not always the fear of unknown. The known can also give us fear. So it's strange that then why else does fear have this control over us? And as Asha, right? You mentioned that humans are fearful of situations or things or people, situations especially that you're not in control of. So that also gives us a lot of fear. If you're not in control of any situation, and the best example, can anybody give a best example of any situation recently where, huh? Yeah, the pandemic, that's the classic example. People freaked out. Why? Because of not being in control of the situation. You know, there's so many diseases around, and people know the solution and the antidote and things like that. So of course, it's because of lack of control. That also gives us a lot of fear. Like I keep giving the example of a mouse or a rat. You might be scared of a mouse, but if it's in a cage or if a snake, if it's in an enclosure, you might not be really scared. You know? You might even go look at it like, "Ooh, like it's how cute," and things like that. But once it's out of the enclosure, then all of a sudden your fear is let loose. So it's again, it's interesting about what exactly is it about fear? What is that mystery element, the X factor or the mystery element about fear that we feel we have no control over? Like again, the example that I gave earlier, either standing up to a bully or public speaking, you know exactly what the problem is. And still it's so hard for us to understand and rationalize. So what is it? Any thoughts of what that mystery factor is?
I think about it, like the way that human beings evolutionized, it's like our ancestors, that they had like wild animals like tigers and everything like that. So like fear, if they didn't have that fear, they would be able to sleep and to get away to like live. And now the society that we live in, we have settled, we have built structure, but innately like our brain hasn't evolutionized that much, but that primal fear still exists within us. And so like speaking creates this side of like, oh my god, your brain is like more than that. So the way that I look at fear is like feel like my brain is trying to keep me alive and fear alive with me. And it's kind of just keep me alive, but it doesn't understand that there is no physical real threat. It's just the way that the world that we live in. So much noise going on. So I want my practice that just like quieting down that noise and honor that fear that we think you brain. We're trying to keep me safe, but there is no danger. And just really talking myself and also just making space for it without trying to make it something bad. It's okay. So, yeah, just like that.
Excellent, thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned how primal fear, which is like natural, it's there in our ancestors, and you said it evolves into something that's unnecessarily complex, and we have to remind our brains to sort of calm down. And yeah, thank you. That's an interesting analysis. You have to unlearn that, like you're talking, this natural fears, which is just natural and it's needed. And there are some fears which are acquired. But yet, when it comes to fear itself, it's so mysterious. So what is that mystery factor, that X factor about fear that makes it really complex? Yeah. Vulnerability. Right? Thank you. One of the things that makes fear so complex is it's actually the mind. It's the combination of fear and the mind when it's combined together. That's what adds it this mysterious dimension. In fact, the mind itself, the ancient yoga scriptures talk a lot about the mind, how complex the mind is. And psychologists and sociologists since time have sort of tried to dissect and analyze the mind. And still it's so hard because the mind is so unpredictable. It's this mysterious dimension. It's really hard to tap in. So when fear is combined with the mind, that's where it becomes really complex. It's really hard to understand and rationalize. And mind works in three ways in conjunction with fear. One is it magnifies the fear. whatever fear is there, it just magnifies 10 times, 100 times more than it actually is. You might see, like in our day-to-day situations, day-to-day life, there might be something we're anxious of, and the mind just blows it out of proportion and paints this picture that is actually worse than what it is. And once that event is past, and you look back and you feel it wasn't that bad, it was okay. So it's the mind that magnifies it and it makes it really blows that fear out of proportion. Yeah.
As kind of if we think about like spiritual center, something that is your typical text. And I think a lot of your because scarcity, a lot of schools operate like here, it's all like top down. So, it's going after like spiritual possibilities out there.
Thank you for that thought. And that's why spiritual centers really help us sort of ground ourselves. It calms the mind down. So the mind magnifies fear more than what. I mean, fear is there. It's not that the perceivable threat is not there, but the mind just magnifies it. So that's one way. The other way is the mind misprojects our fear onto other things or other people. For example, let's say you're scared of snakes and you're in a dark room and you see a rope and you might immediately think it's a snake. Because the mind is projecting your sort of fear onto other things. So the first is it magnifies, second is it misprojects, and the threat might not be there at all, but it's just the mind that is projecting your own insecurities and fear onto other things. And the third way is the mind also concocts fear out of nothing, out of, like there's so many people who, especially today's our modern time, there's so many paranoia and phobias. People the mind just concocts fear that the government is out there to get you, or people are out there to sort of harm you and things like that. In fact, there's a disorder called paranoid personality disorder, where people are paranoid about their own security. Either people are out there to kill them, or so that's all the function of the mind. So three ways that mind and fear is like a bad combination. Fear itself, like we're discussing, is a defense mechanism, but in conjunction with the mind magnifies it, it misprojects our fear, and then concocts new fears. Like I remember once we were in a ashram pilgrimage in India. They'd taken a group of people on a tour, and we were in a nice village, beautiful village. You're sitting, it's like a historic pilgrimage site. We were sitting by a lake, and we were having our lunch. There was a break, and we were all having lunch. It's a big group. And there was one stray dog nearby, and there were two ladies in our group sitting together and having lunch. And one of the ladies had this unusual fear of dogs, and she started freaking out. Oh my God, oh my God. And the dog just turned his head. And she's like, oh my God, he's looking. And I could hear the conversation they were having. And the other lady's trying to calm her down. And I could see the dog is basically not even looking in her direction. And she was just completely misprojecting. Oh my God. And the dog sort of moved its tail and she started getting up like, oh. And the other lady had to calm her down. Relax, you're just misprojecting. It's one thing if the dog is charging and growling and looking at you really close. It was so far away, and it was really fascinating for me, like, what's going on? So it's the mind that actually really sort of either magnifies it or misprojects or concocts new fears. The combination of the fear and mind is like a really bad combination. So that's why in many the Bhakti Yoga texts, ancient sacred scriptures, it lays a lot of emphasis on the mind, and the best way to control and purify the mind is mantra meditation, which we were doing at the beginning. So there's two forms of mantra meditation. One is in a musical way. You look at a mantra, and the literal meaning of mantra you were asking, right? What does the mantra mean? Mantra is manasa trayate iti mantra. Mana in Sanskrit is the English of mind. So the English word mind actually comes from the ancient Sanskrit word mana or manasa. So mana means the mind, and manasa trayate, that which liberates the mind, is known as mantra. So meditation, the whole idea of meditation, it purifies our consciousness, it calms us down, releases us of stress, anxiety. So it's a central aspect of any Oriental process, spiritual process. Buddhism, the Hare Krishna, in our Hare Krishna tradition, mantra meditation is a big aspect, and it controls and purifies the mind. So that's why a lot of emphasis is laid on meditation and yoga, and it aims at finding inner peace. And it's, of course, it has much more dimension, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. But needless to say, like meditation and yoga is like a great way to sort of control and fight fear, and it really helps people to sort of combat their fear. But now one question you might have is, despite a controlled mind, still there might be objects of threat. You know, if something is of threat, it is of threat, right? It is, you're about to like whatever that object of threat is, you know, whether it's fear of losing your job or fear of, you know, your life being at risk. The threat is still there. Our external reality doesn't change. So you might wonder, okay, so yes, that's one good aspect of yoga. In fact, there's one really nice quote that I like: "To conquer fear is the beginning of wisdom," Bertrand Russell said. So a lot of wisdom actually goes into sort of understanding fear, and that's how ancient yoga texts, they take a more philosophical direction to understanding fear. If you see all the yoga, bhakti yoga texts, they get into a lot of philosophical aspect, and really, really helps us to understand this world around us. We might not be able to change it, at least it really helps us to understand the world around us. In one ancient scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that padam padam yad vipadam, that this material world is such that there is danger at every step. That is the nature of this world. At every turn, there's some kind of insecurity, or every, you know, you walk out on the street, you take a step outside the curve, and God forbid, you know, you might be hit. One of my friends recently she was riding a bicycle, and she got hit by a car. Not hit, but she got pushed by some drunk driver. It was caught on camera, the street cam, and then and she got injured. Her jaw was sort of misplaced, and like 6 months to a year of like surgery and therapy and things like that. So the scripture says, "Padam padam yat vipadam natesham," that this material world actually there's danger at every step. It's actually like a bad neighborhood. You don't want to walk around in a bad neighborhood late at night, or
Yeah, well, what I thought about that is that my theory exists that every kind of human experience and approach, it's all part of the spiritual world. So they all like belong to us in a certain kind of way. And spiritual is like kind of like accepting all kinds of circumstances, including danger, including fear, that gets part of us to show compassion to them, like passion. All, you know, like we're feeling. So my thoughts on everything.
thank you. Yeah. So as the scriptures say, it's this wisdom that actually helps our spiritual growth. Just like you were saying, understanding how there's actually material world is a dangerous place. Basically, it's every step, every turn, there's uncertainty in our lives. You know, one wrong move, and either your relationships can end, your jobs and things like that. So this whole place, material world, is a place of insecurity. And that insecurity is what constantly gives us this fear, innate fear. It's always there, this fear. And it said that nobody can be completely free of fear. Like, have you seen anybody who's completely free of fear? You might see the most courageous, brave person who's not scared of death. But he or she might still be scared of losing their loved ones. The fear is always there. So the Bhakti Yoga text says that fear is part of our material existence. It can be conquered. We'll talk about that towards the end of the discussion. But the scripture starts off by saying this material world actually is a place of uncertainty and danger. Like I said, padam padam yad vipadam natesham. There's fear, even in animal species, is noticed. Even animals also have fear. You can see how they respond to a certain visible threat. They react a certain way. So even animals, they have fear. In fact, one nice poet in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, he says that he compares his life as Kamala Dalajana Jivana Talamana, that our life is fickle like a drop of water on a leaf of a lotus flower. Have you guys seen a lotus? Like either a lotus petal or a leaf of a lotus flower, it's like waxy. It has a waxy quality, like wax. If you put a drop of water, it doesn't stick and absorb, it just rolls off. So the poet says our lives are like, it's fickle and tottering like a drop of water on a leaf of a lotus petal. It's really fickle. Any moment our lives can end or situations can change. From a place of opulence, we can lose our fortune and vice versa. So wisdom starts by understanding that actually this material world is not our permanent place. All across all traditions, faith traditions, there's this understanding that fear is then becomes natural. If you understand this, then you also understand that when fear comes with this. It's like a package deal. Material world comes with fear. If there's insecurity, then naturally there is fear. And especially the Bhakti Yoga texts say that beyond this material world, there is like a spiritual realm. Like I said, in every free tradition, there's this basic understanding. There's a spiritual realm, which is absolute. In fact, Plato, a famous Greek philosopher, said that he talked about this theory of forms, or the world of forms. And he said that there must surely exist an absolute realm, which is like a prototype. And everything we see in our material world is actually like is derived from that prototype. So you call it the theory of forms, the world of forms. So Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is also saying the same thing. Parasasmatu Bhagavad, that beyond this world is also a spiritual dimension, a spiritual realm. And that realm is called Vaikunta. Vaikunta means a place where there's no anxiety. Imagine a place you're free from fear, truly free from fear and anxiety. So it's often encouraged, spiritual life is often encouraged to sort of seek out that dimension of spiritual life. And furthermore, it says that our material world is guided and governed by this energy called as the illusory energy called Maya. Have you heard of the word Maya? Maya, the two syllables Maya literally means that which is not. Maya is this illusory energy that blinds and clouds our spiritual nature. Like how often have you been in relationships thinking, oh my God, this person is the best person. And 6 months later, like, oh God, I hate this person. Or you might buy like a shoes or a shirt thinking, oh my, I love this. And a year later, you're like, what am I doing with this shirt? It's ugly. So it's so hard for us to sort of perceive things. And that's what Srimad Bhagavatam says, that this scripture, it helps us distinguish reality from illusion. So this material world is governed by this illusory energy called as Maya Shakti. And this clouds our own spiritual understanding, our spiritual nature. Yes.
It's interesting. So I worked, so my last job I had was kind of like very scary because of the boss. Was very scary narcissist and was watching anybody in sort of state and getting extremely angry. And it's kind of funny because I work as a psychotherapist, so it's a psychotherapy company. He's a psychotherapist, and now he's like kind of crazy. But it was a very scary experience, but I learned a lot from it because I learned to be able to work with narcissists. So I lost my job, and that was a very scary experience, right? So I was like, well, it wasn't just like it's like really terrible, but then I just like ended up in a better place. And I sense that like world takes me to a better place, and this world that you're talking about here exists here. Like kind of like in the background, it's guiding us to a better place.
Thank you for that real life practical example. So this Maya Shakti, this illusory energy clouds our own spiritual understanding. The Bhagavatam scripture says this Maya is like a shapeshifter. So it's really hard for us to perceive through this haze, through this cloud. And it's said that the scriptures further say, due to our association with this illusory energy, with this material world in a material way, fear arises from that association, from that illusory potency. And the world is actually, last night we were talking about, was it last night? The world, there's only two things, this matter and spirit, right? Over there was last time we were talking about this. In this world, there's only two kinds of entities. One is matter, which is like by nature is dead. Like I was telling you, everything around us is like dead matter. All of this is dead matter. It's not going to respond. There's no consciousness in dead matter. And the other thing is spirit. And spirit, by definition, is like something that's conscious. So the scriptures, yeah.
I disagree that there's no consciousness.
In matter?
Can you prove this one?
So would you like to further elaborate that?
You all separate this chair from me?
So further to elaborate that point, so the scriptures again say that there's matter and spirit, and matter by definition cannot respond or have consciousness. So what we perceive as consciousness is not a product of matter. Of course, this is one worldview. You have your worldview, and we're not here to sort of necessarily negate. So that's also a valid perspective, but I'm just sharing what's mentioned in the Bhakti Yoga scriptures. Yeah.
If the universe is everything, that includes you.
Thank you. So yeah, so basically this illusory energy is, the scriptures say that fear arises by association with matter, because matter by nature is temporary, and temporariness really freaks humans out. You know, anything that's temporary. I've seen so many reels with pet owners, they have a cute puppy, and then you see a cat and say, oh, I'm gonna live without you, and things like that. So temporariness is so scary. When you associate matter, matter by nature is always in a state of flux. And this state of change always induces fear. And so it's said that once we understand our spiritual position, Bhagavad Gita especially say that the spirit soul is eternal. So once we understand the eternality of the soul, that has this effect of reducing fear. It has this effect of helping us conquer fear. And furthermore, it explains that fear is actually a product of lack of spiritual knowledge. Huh?
Oh, Alex.
Yeah, like a spiritual enlightenment, or to lack of a better word of ignorance, but that word is not used in a judgmental way. But because of this lack of spiritual enlightenment, it's said that one of the Upanishads say that our heart space, the heart chakra, can actually be the darkest place. No amount of lights or sun can illuminate the darkness within. It's so dark, but there's only one thing that can illuminate that space, which is spiritual knowledge. So spiritual knowledge can enlighten our hearts. And it is through this enlightenment that we can conquer fear. In fact, there's, yeah.
Oh, no, I'll stay my throat.
Sure. In fact, I don't know if you've heard, there's a nice definition, one alternative definition I see of fear, like false evidence appearing real. And that is what we were sort of talking about, how sometimes this illusory energy can sort of induce this fear, and it's because of our association with that. And there is a really nice verse from an ancient scripture called Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the ancient scriptures of yoga. It talks about this ancient Sanskrit verse. This verse is in Sanskrit. It says, Bhayam dvitiya vinishetas syad, ishad apetasya viparyo smriti. So this verse says that ishad apetasya, the second line, if you see, it says ishad apetasya. Apetasya means to turn around. When the soul turns around against his or own spiritual nature, against divine, and it willingly, there's a process of sort of turning around. It's like just like you're having a conversation with someone, and you just look away. You just turn your face around. It's almost like you're not interested in that. So it said that when we turn around from our own spiritual nature, Vishad Apetasya, then the result is Viparyo Smriti. Viparyo is like forgetfulness. Smriti is consciousness. So because we want to turn away from our own spiritual understanding, it leads to this Viparyo Smriti, which is forgetful of our own spiritual nature. Because to some extent, if you're looking for fulfillment outside of our spiritual existence, then to have that, we must have this forgetfulness, right, of our spiritual nature. So it's Viparyo Smriti. And it said because of this forgetfulness, Viparyo Smriti, then one misidentifies with the material body. So it said that our existence goes much beyond the body. We're not just this body, but we're the soul, the indwelling soul. So the Bhagavad Gita encourages us to sort of have that understanding that the soul is eternal. The body by nature is temporary, like matter. Like once the soul leaves the body, the matter is not going to sort of respond. Neither is this dead matter going to produce. Like for example, if the soul leaves, then your hair is not going to keep growing from the body. It's just dead matter. So the soul, Bhagavad Gita explains, it's the soul that enlightens the body. So then the verse further explains, it explains a beautiful, like a chain of sequence of how fear arises. So Ishad Apitas, we turn away from our spiritual understanding, and it leads to Viparyo Smriti, forgetfulness. And then because of the forgetfulness, we misidentify with this material body, that I'm gay, straight, black, white, and so on. These are, yes, they may be a certain reality, but these are just designations or labels. All of our disagreements come because of these external labels. And because of misidentifying with the body, then it says that we are absorbed with matter. It's our fascination and absorption of this energy, this illusory energy. And that is known as bhayam dvitiya abhiniveshatasya. Abhiniveshata means one's absorption. And that absorption is what gives rise to bhayam. So you see the first word bhayam, in Sanskrit it means fear. So fear arises because of our fixation on matter. And that's how the ancient yoga texts explain that this is like a chain of sequence. When we turn away from our own spiritual understanding, then it leads to this fear. And you see also fear can be a product of attachment also. Whatever you're attached to gives you also fears. It can be a source of fear of losing it. So a person who truly walks around free from attachment doesn't have fear of losing it. You've never possessed something. But of course, doesn't mean you're sort of give everything up, and it's not possible to completely not possess anything. But the idea is to regulate our attachments and fears. That's the whole idea of Bhakti Yoga text. So again, continuing the text so far, yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure. Aditya, did I?
Yeah, that's right. What do you mean by fear? Just because reflecting on my experiences, there are different kinds of fear. And fundamentally, I almost think that fear is a really good thing at a certain level or amount. There's the first one, which is the primal fear, right? Which is I'm stuck in a mountain, I need to survive.
Yeah.
Or there's a really dangerous situation, I need to get away. At that point, you let fear take over, you let your instincts come into play, and that leads to survival, which is what she was also about. And then I play sports, and or anything you do, any kind of performance, you have butterflies in your stomach. You have the anxiety of competition.
Yeah.
That almost leads to like the best performances. That's why people perform in competition, not practice. So in a certain way, like that kind of fear, which is natural, it comes when you don't know what's going to happen. That when you let that take over above a certain degree, leads to paralysis, but in a regulated manner, again, leads to a more positive result. And the last one, which I'm a little confused by and would love to hear your thoughts, is the concepts of being God-fearing and fear of law, the fear of being like a good person. And to a certain degree, again, that is said to be a good thing, where you tend to be a good human being, having a certain level. In all of these cases, if you let it go to the extreme, it leads to the other. So curious to hear your thoughts on, is fear really a bad thing, and isn't it kind of necessary for it?
Excellent. Thank you for bringing that point. In fact, we started our discussion with that first point. I don't know if you remember that fear itself is not a bad thing. It's a defense mechanism. But the problem is when fear takes over our being and it paralyzes, and it's like a gripping fear. That's the issue. So fear itself, recognizing and using, instead of losing yourself to fear, you can use fear to sort of react in a certain way, which is what you were saying, right? So the whole idea of yoga is to regulate. It's not necessarily to go to extremes, but to regulate our emotions, our being. So that's the idea of fear. It's not so much as to completely, that's one of the things we've been discussing. Nobody can be completely free of fear because the material world is a place of, like we were discussing, padam padam yat vipadam, that's natural. Fear, elements of fear and threat will be there. Like Leon, you're also mentioning, right? That's part of our growth. Understanding that is part of our spiritual growth. So it's not that fear is bad. You'll see many TED talks saying how we can sort of get rid of fear and things like that. So that's not exactly what we're saying. Fear will be there, and we have these categories of natural fears and acquired fears and unnatural fears, and phobias are these irrational fears. So there's like and I started this discussion saying this fear is like a huge topic, and we're just taking one aspect of it. But generally, the idea is fear is not a bad thing as long as we don't lose ourselves to it. So that's what yoga is, to take back the control. And fearing bad thing is actually a good thing. Let's say you're scared of crime, getting involved in crime. If you're fearful of substance abuse, that is a good fear. You know, if I'm really careful of not wanting to expose myself to these things, that's not a bad thing. So yes, yeah. Excellent, thank you. I was actually thinking of bringing that point. So there's these different energy chakras. The base chakra is called as Muladhara chakra. Do you guys understand what chakras are? They are energy points in our body. So at the base of our spine is like the Muladhara chakra. That's what regulates survival, fear, instinct. That's the base chakra. So that's like a more primal instinctive quality that humans and animals have in common, the base chakra. So predominantly our consciousness can reside there. Yeah.
Animals have chakras too, I didn't know that.
No, I'm not saying animals, the chakras are, I'm saying the fear is common between animals and humans, that instinctive quality. And that is, in humans, that is governed by the base chakra at the base of the spine. So our consciousness, if it's residing at that level, then our outlook towards life is based on instinct, survival, fear. And then we raise higher, and in the solar plexus, there's another chakra, Manipura chakra, and so on. There's different chakras that are there. So the solar plexus chakra guides with sort of ego, and then the heart chakra, the emotions, and there's the throat chakra, the third eye, and so on. So like this fear basically is governed by the base chakra. So when we learn to regulate our consciousness and raise it higher accordingly, and the crown chakra is known as basically the I forget the name of the crown chakra, but the crown chakra is the seat of enlightenment. So that's why yogis try to raise their awareness to the crown chakra, and that's how they can sort of conquer their lower instincts. So that is how through yoga you can conquer these lower instincts and sort of overcome fear. And again, the idea is not to be completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. We're not saying that you shouldn't be free, but how to regulate one's fear. That's the whole idea. Any other thoughts on this topic? Of course, there's so much to discuss how yoga scriptures deal with fear. You know, like this verse says that Dvitiya is like dualities. As soon as one gets preoccupied with the dualities of life, that turns away from the spiritual nature, then fear arises in the heart. So one is the first solution, like we were discussing, is like mantra meditation, because the combination of the mind and fear is like a really, I think that should also answer your question, right? Like we were talking about how what makes fear really mysterious is the conjunction of these two. The mind works in three ways. It magnifies fear, it misprojects, and it concocts fear. So by mantra meditation, one learns how to control the mind, and by a practice of yoga, one learns how to live a life which is centered in spiritual life constantly. When we turn away from our spiritual nature, like for example, have you noticed that the moment you do something wrong, then fear arises? Let's say you walk into work every day, you feel like a champion, like yeah. But then the moment you do something wrong at work, all of a sudden now you're fearful. Or in a relationship, if you're cheating, now just fear sort of arises. So the moment you do something wrong, fear arises automatically in your heart. So if the scriptures say the material world is a place of fear, that means our existence here is the foundation is fear. That is because bhayam dvitiya vinishitasya. Dvitiya, this absorption is illusory energy. Turning away from our spiritual nature evokes fear. So as soon as we are situated in our spiritual nature, then most of the fears, unnatural fears go away. Let me put it that way. Unnatural fears go away. So certain fears are helpful. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Aditya.
You talked about the world as a Maya, nature and not being attached to things. Is there a way to be ambitious without necessarily being fearful? And it doesn't need to be like, there's like the black and white is like funny and all of that. But let's say you want to create a big company or serve a million people, like that's a big goal. But the company with that is also the fear of not being able to do it. So seriously,
Excellent, thank you. Again, you asked all wonderful questions that further beautifully enhances our discussion. In fact, that is the topic of Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is a discussion between Arjuna and Krishna. And Krishna is like the divine. We call Krishna in this tradition. And one of the instincts of Arjuna was to sort of abandon his duties and just sort of, and Krishna is saying, no, actually do it, but do it with the right consciousness. So it's not so much as to not have attachments, but to regulate our attachments. Even our job, how to rightfully perform our obligations, duties, that is karma yoga. To perform our duties but with the right consciousness, because sometimes we might think that taking a spiritual tradition means I have to sort of give everything up, have a monastic lifestyle, I should sort of The idea is not that, like, even money, it's not that one should not have money, but use that money for the right purpose. So it's not a bad thing to be either rich or powerful, but the idea is not to misuse our power or money or opulence and things like that. Yes. Did that touch upon what you wanted to say?
No, I just want to say, I remember in my spiritual, in the observation of this spiritual journey, I can say that in the beginning, I wanted to take away everything. I mean, I started threading my hair. I was like, going to nature, and I was like, I'm not drinking no more, I'm not smoking no more. I'm not doing none of this stuff. I'm just meditating, nature, and the crazy thing about it is that my life always turns back around like a circle. So because like a circle, and I have just came to the realization, like, no, meet yourself in the middle. You don't have to be
Excellent.
so freaking out there, and don't be all the way on the negative side. Just be in the middle and without attachments. And I feel like that had helped me grow a lot, because it's like we on Instagram, on Facebook, and we see everybody going positive, and it's like, it's all like a fake, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, stay as yourself and without attachment.
Excellent. That's exactly what Arjuna also, same journey he went through. He had the same reaction. I'm just going to go to the forest and just thread my hair. And Krishna saying, no, you got to regulate it. You can't go to either extremes. That's the whole. Any other final thoughts? We are running short of time. Any other final thoughts, reflections, especially those who haven't spoken? Pretty much everybody has spoken, I guess. So again, thank you very much. And this is Soul Talks, happens every Saturday. Please bring your friends, family. I think now we're going to do a short mantra meditation. Is that right? And then followed by lunch.
And I very much appreciate this day, all your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your encouragement. Leon is a regular here. He's a psychologist. So he makes sure that I'm on track.
That's why I have this.
And for those who feel inspired, please feel free to grab one of our wisdom literature, and Brajrani will fill you in with the details. So now maybe we can have our kirtan. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, this is like it's better for cheddar. Not ready yet? Not ready. I like to try.
We just take a bag.
Yeah. Let's do it. I'll be-
It's good. Come on.
So the best process of this kirtan is like a group effort. So it's not so much as a solo performance. So that's what brings us together. That's the best part of kirtan, which unites us. It's a group effort. So the singer sings and everybody responds. Like I said earlier, don't feel shy. Feel free to sing with your heart. And it's a nice way of meditating on the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Thank you.
Nice applause for
Just making sure he's on track.
Always keeping on.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to our weekly